Hello, my name's Mark Saunders, and this is a YouTube video on using Gen AI to help draft a request for physical access. It's one of a series of YouTube videos on my YouTube channel, Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and you can see the link for this on the bottom left-hand corner of each slide. In this YouTube video presentation, we're going to start off by looking at what are the components of an access request. So the things we need to include when we're requesting access. And we're looking at initial access here. So we're looking at the components when we're requiring physical access. And then we're going to look at how we write Gen AI prompts and then actually write a Gen AI prompt to take the initial request for access we've drafted and read through the draft and basically ask Gen AI to improve it. And then we're going to evaluate what Gen AI has done. We're going to finish up by looking at some warnings. And the first thing is we need to be aware of the university's policies on using Gen AI and also on plagiarism and how this relates to Gen AI. And then finally, at the very end, we'll finish with some references and further reading. So let's look at the components of an access request. And remember, this is an initial access request for physical access. We need to say what the focus of the research is, and we need to say what we require from our access. And once we've done that, we need to think of the concerns that the gatekeeper we're asking for access may have. So we're going to be asking for concerns about confidentiality. And these will be concerns about whether or not we're going to reveal the identity of those involved, participants if it's an interview, and respondents if it's a questionnaire. They're going to have concerns about how we present the findings. In particular, we don't present the findings in a way that reveals who was involved, and also for not sharing the data. If we're promising anonymity, this means it will not be possible for those involved to be identified, even by the research. This normally is used by questionnaires. They're also going to have concerns about how long the interview is going to take, and obviously how the data are going to be used. We also, in our letter requesting access, need to identify possible benefits, things like and the insights that they can gain from this research, and it may be enjoyable to actually talk to somebody, and of course we may offer a summary of the findings, but if we do this we have to send it. The letter, or more likely nowadays email for access, needs to be written in a suitable, normally professional business-like language, and it needs to make it easy for those receiving the letter to respond, so by giving contact details, normally email or telephone. So let's look at an initial access request. And here is an actual one that could have been used. So it starts off asking the person, this will be in an email, further my telephone call. So the person's already done a phone call to find out who they need to contact to gain access. Then they introduce themselves and they say, I would like to introduce myself and explain the reasons for me contacting you. So it's setting it up rather nicely. So, in the paragraph where they introduce themselves, they say that they're a part-time undergraduate student, which university they're at, and that they've actually got a full-time job. And this is relevant because the research is actually on financial services, as we'll see later. And then it talks about the research itself and says it's about chatbots and their use by financial service firms to give investment advice. And notice how give is spelt incorrectly here, and that hasn't been picked up. And then it says a bit more detail about the process of the research. It then goes on to say what's actually required in terms of the access. And they say they want to speak to the person who the letter is addressed to, Ms. Armfield, and also a number of members of this professional group which she chairs. And then I hope you'll be able to help me. In the case of this letter for access, Senzi has actually said you can see further details in an attachment, which is basically her research proposal. She then goes on to talk about what she's going to do to overcome the gatekeeper's concerns, and in particular she talks about the time it's going to take and crucially the fact that the information will not be credited to them in the report. So she's promising confidentiality and of the information there, in terms of as we defined it earlier. Next, she talks about how she's going to facilitate replies, and she says you can email me. Now, this seems somewhat stupid, really, because it's very obvious that they can be emailed because there's an email address at the top, and then gives a telephone number and says that then she'll make a subsequent appointment through the person's personal assistant. And then it finishes off with thank you very much and moves on. However, It doesn't say anything about the benefits that the responding or being taking part in this research will actually give to the gatekeeper and their organisation. This is a problem that really needs to be included. So let's now think about how we might use GenAI prompts. And when we do a GenAI prompt, it actually harnesses GenAI's capacity. And without having decent prompts, then what we ask it to do is left to GenAI's interpretation. So let's think what we look at in terms of prompt. A prompt needs to have task, what you want it to do, the context in which you want to do it, and then some exemplars or examples or a bit more detail. And these are part of the basic prompt formula. In addition, we can add further things like do this, don't do that, and the exact format that we might actually want the response to be in. And this is called overall the specification formula. So let's move on and have a look at this. So here's a GenAI prompt. Please can you check the email below for spelling? The context, that is UK English. Also the task is to check it for grammar. And in terms of the exemplar, we'd like it to be businesslike. And let's see what ChatGPT in this case responded. Here's a revised version of your email using correct UK spelling, grammar and a professional tone. So it's interpreted businesslike as professional tone. So the first thing we see is that because it's an email, it has added a subject line. It's also sorted out the punctuation and made the way it's formatted in more formal business language, even on the first page. Let's move on and look at the next page. So then we have the same introduction, but notice how the language has been made more formal. I am required to successfully complete, much more formal way of saying it. Financial service firms to provide investment advice and the way in which this technology has the... So now let's continue looking at how GenAI has edited this draft. The first thing we see is it's starting to put in punctuation a little bit more to make it read more clearly. It's also, again, working on making sure the language of business language is formal. And we can see this, for example, as I would like the opportunity to speak with you and several of your members. And remember, this letter is to a professional organisation, or rather this email is to a professional organisation. As we continue to move through the email, we see throughout that GenAI is making the language more formal. I have suggested a set of topics and questions. I hope these will be helpful in preparing for our discussion and things like that. And then finally, as we move to the ending of the email, we see a few more things coming through that GenAI has been able to do. First of all, it's removed the email address because it's coming from an email, so there's no need to actually add it, although you still need to say, please email me, and then we say cool. And then the language has become much more formal again. I will liaise with. And then GenAI has added some closing remarks. I look forward to the opportunity of meeting you in the near future. In the meantime, thank you for considering my request. And then we can see a punctuation added after yours sincerely. But there still needs to add something about the benefits of taking part in research. And so this hasn't done. So GenAI has been able to read the draft and improve the language and sort out the punctuation and things and make sure it looks like an email, but it hasn't said, this is me, so I need to add this as well, which really emphasises the need to read things through carefully and to check what should be there rather than relying entirely on GenAI. But we need to remember that we're using GenAI in a university context very often, and universities have strict policies on how it can and can't be used. And so I've looked at my own university here because I think it illustrates it quite well. And the first thing it says is that GenAI tools can act as a third-party editorial assistant, and it defines what this means: correcting spelling and punctuation, reducing sentence length to improve clarity, and ensuring the writing is following the correct conventions of grammar and syntax. And there is no doubt that GenAI has done this for us. But then it says it must not be used to alter your text. So, about clarifying and developing ideas and arguments. Well, we could argue that it has developed the ideas because it's actually put a strapline in. We haven't used it to correct the accuracy of information, but we may do in other things. And it has actually developed the work a little bit. And then it also talks about not using GenAI to translate your work or to reduce the length of work. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful about plagiarism, because plagiarism can occur when we're claiming our own or work, either intentional or by omission, was not done by us. And so if we submit work that's been created by something or someone else, then that's plagiarism, and that's academic misconduct, which means basically you're going to fail. And it says that artificial intelligence generated context and the content written by a third party is plagiarism as well. And if we look at this email, perhaps some of it has been generated by Gen AI. We need to be a bit careful. It's close to that, but not quite. So we would probably, in the case of this email, need to go back and look at the strapline and change it to one of our own, and then edit it to include the bits that were left out on benefits, and then we'll probably be all right, because the rest of how it's been used has literally been used to check the grammar and spelling and punctuation. So before we finish, let's have a look at some references and further reading. First of all, I'm going to look at new book of mine, Doing Research in Business Management, which is out later this year, and this is chapter 3 here actually looks at the use of Gen AI in gaining access. Other chapters also look at the use of Gen AI in various aspects of the research process. Valeric Business School's handout on how to do Gen AI formulas for writing prompts is really helpful. And then finally, there's the University of Birmingham guidance there for you to look at as well. I hope you found this YouTube video presentation useful, and I'd be really grateful if you'd subscribe to my channel, Mark Saunders on Research Methods, and also told your friends and colleagues about the channel as well. I'm adding new videos to the channel nearly every week, and hopefully they'll be of help to you in your own research.